As I say, sorry for the slight technical hits, but welcome to Sales TV, the first episode today. We have another one later in the day for primarily the Americas, and we will hope to welcome people from Asia and Africa in the different time zones. Today is World Mental Health Day, so we will be talking a little bit about that, even though we've talked about it, I think, fair to say, on previous occasions. But we also look today at a non-political way, and our hearts go out to everybody involved in the Middle East situation on both sides of the conflict, and we hope there is a speedy end to that and a very limited loss of life. Joined here today in the Grenville Turner Studios at Cranfield by my co-host Alex, and in the green room we have Adam and Tim as well, so they are here. And we've also got two fantastic guests as well. So, Alex, why don't you take us through the show?
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Sales TV. As Andy said, my name's Alex Abbott. I'm founder of Supero, and Supero are social selling experts. The topic today is particularly important to me because what Supero's mission is to eliminate poor mental health in sales. And so, I'd like to bring on our first guest. As Andy said, we have a double header today. We have our first guest talking about mental health and well-being in sales. And our second guest, Tias, talking about, for sales leadership, how to obtain support from HR to ensure successful talent acquisition in sales. So without further ado, Ram, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alex.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is at the Institute of Sales Professionals and why mental health and well-being is so important to you?
Sure. I am actually the co-chair for the Mental Health and Wellbeing Committee for ISP. For all my sins, I have actually been working in this area for almost 30 years. And we've been measuring experience, or what we used to call it earlier, as to how people are feeling, and use that information to help companies improve performance. In ISP specifically, what we are looking at is creating a well-being pledge for organizations to sign up to. And then we want to ensure that they all adhere to what they have signed up for, in a way that it is easily applicable to all the aspects of sales. Does that answer your question, or do you want me to elaborate?
It does. So So I have another point for you. What do you think is the biggest cause of poor mental health in salespeople today?
See, I mean, if you really look at it, every organization has got, that I've spoken or seen, has got a well-being pledge or a statement. But when it comes to implementation, although the heart is in the right place, life takes a step aside and work kicks in. So they are actually expected to stretch beyond what they are capable of. And that is actually impacting salespeople in a significant way. I mean, we all go on roller coasters because we like the adrenaline once a while. But sales as a profession has always got this highs and lows. And you're always experiencing this when you win a deal or lose a deal. And to add to that complexity, when we have unrealistic expectations that are being set, plus the individuals also set their own barriers. They are afraid to ask help. So as a result, if you look at it, more than 65% of salespeople are actually experiencing some form of mental health challenges, which is not, something that you would see. I mean, according to stats, UK averages, 2 out of 5 have a mental health challenge. But when it comes to sales profession, that's far higher. So that's why we need to actually look at this much more seriously.
Yeah, I was reading some research from the World Health Organization about the fact that 1 in 8 people around the world are suffering with poor mental health. And if you look at the work that Jeff Risley is doing, the founder of the Sales Health Alliance, Canadian-based company, he's been surveying salespeople, I think somewhere between 700 to 1,000 salespeople around the world. And he's found that 4 out of 5 salespeople are suffering with high levels of stress, and 3 in 5 salespeople are suffering with poor mental health, as self-diagnosed, which I think is astonishing, and hopefully that gives you some data there, Ram. What are your thoughts in terms of whether this is down to the individual and the pressure they're putting on themselves to perform versus the organization?
See, I mean, wherever I have seen things work is basically where the organization actually takes the first step. The leaders have to demonstrate their commitment towards, taking well-being seriously. And during COVID, we had so many organizations and especially leaders coming out saying that they had mental health challenges and dealing with it, and how they were able to overcome those challenges. So that set some war stories, which inspired people to open up. But then post COVID, we all forgot what we went through. And as human beings, we tend to forget things very quickly. So we went back to our old ways and we started looking at, how do I get back to my old performance style rather than reflecting on how was it actually compatible with my life. So an organization has to take the first step. And when I take the first step is basically I read in a this was, I think it was Aon's well-being survey globally. They say only 43% of organizations have a well-being strategy, and they're saying that they're investing a lot of time and effort, but it is not clear where the impact is. It's like the old adage of marketing. I don't know
Yeah,
which 50% is working. So they're
yeah,
actually spraying and praying. So that is again another challenge. And you have a well-being pledge, and most of the times it is created without involving the team. So they come up with a pledge which they think is what would serve the purpose. But in reality, they don't then follow that through to how is it going to be lived? How are you going to monitor and measure and manage that set of pledges that you have published it? So
yeah,
I always love the Simon Sinek way of looking at things. Why, how, and what. Why is basically the purpose of why do you have to care about your salespeople's well-being? What are the things that you're going to be doing, which is basically a pledge or statement, and what are the specific things that you would do or not do to ensure that you live by those pledges. And that's where there's a missing gap. And now when it comes to individuals, again, we all live in a macho culture, isn't it? We want to show that I am I cannot be broken down. So that basically has got to change.
I
And I
think
think it's
what's
starting to
great
change.
about that, Ram, is what you're hitting there is the same problem with these compliance issues that you have with health issues that you have with compliance. There's a lot of companies that have a compliance statement, yeah, but it doesn't mean anything because most people can't actually find it on a website, and even if they found it, there's some level of skepticism about do they actually live it, unless the frontline employee knows how to live the compliance and converts it into actions and behaviours in front of the customer. It doesn't work, and I think that's where Ram's driving with Dr. Childs and the committee there is how do we actually make this live for people, and how does it actually translate into employers doing something for salespeople?
yeah,
Because there's a big difference here. Is most people are stressed, yeah, and we've talked about today the issues that are going on. And there's a really interesting paper that's called Can't Leave It Behind. And it basically unpacks in terms of sales stress and burnout. The problem is that before you even get in the car or you get on the train, you've got all of these financial stresses, health stresses, other stresses that are there. And then we take salespeople and force them through a whole bunch more. So it gets magnified.
yeah,
Whereas in other kind of professions, it's not as much, and the coping strategies for salespeople
yeah.
are probably not developed and brought through.
Yeah, I think it feels like what you're saying, Ram, what you're saying, Andy, it feels like it's having a well-being initiative is it's like putting a band-aid on a broken leg. It's okay, so you're trying to do something that's right, but without fully diagnosing the problem that is in front of salespeople today, which is they're being put under pressure to do activities that are no longer working like they once did before COVID, as you were saying, Ram.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sales is the only profession where you start worrying about your profession outside work also. And that adds to a lot of stress because you're not hitting targets, which then goes back to what Andy was saying. Then you start worrying about what if, and you start playing these what if scenarios in your head. So what if that happens? Then you can't probably pay your mortgage, which means you lose your house. So that becomes a security issue, financial issue keeps in. So when companies are talking about a well-being pledge or a well-being statement, they just look at work as a solid entity. But what they miss out is before the person starts the car, like Andy said, they have other challenges. And my colleague always says you have to disengage salespeople from their life problems to engage them at work. If you don't have that balance, then it becomes a difficult thing. And we used to talk about work life balance always. Now, during COVID, it became life work balance because we couldn't go out. So we started managing our work around our lives in front of the computer with our kids running behind or the occasional cat jumping on the screen.
Mm.
Now, post COVID, we need to start looking at should we go back to work life balance or a balance of life and work? And that's the challenge that companies have not thought through. And they all got onto the bandwagon and started investing a lot of money on well-being initiatives because everyone is doing it, and it was seen as the right thing to do. And don't get me wrong, it was the right thing to do at that point in time. But now, when I go back and talk to companies, when I ask them, okay, you've invested so much of money in it,
Yeah.
how has it impacted your performance? Because your absenteeism is not, sick days has gone up or it's the same. People are engaged, customers are complaining. So, what impact has your well-being investment or well-being statement or pledge had on people? They can't. And the funny thing is, only a third of money that is actually invested by the organizations then is actually used by employees. There are
Yeah.
various reasons behind that. So that's one of the reasons we thought, you know what, for companies to actually live this and breathe this and ensure that they care about well-being, they need to actually look at a professional body to come up with a pledge which they can sign up to. And why do that? Because it actually gives credibility and expertise because a professional body is doing this, and employees then start trusting that initiative much more than what the organization is saying. It
Yeah.
allows you to compare and do a lot of things. You can create benchmarks and see where you are and so on and so forth.
So Ram, sorry to cut in there, but what I'm hearing is that organizations need to do more. They need to put the well-being of the individual at the heart of what they're doing. The organization needs to think about the work-life balance and how ensuring that salespeople have, hobbies and extracurricular activities outside of work that help them re-energize and refill their cup. But I can't help but continue to think, as I hear you talking, Ram, the real problem that is affecting salespeople's mental health, which is, buyers no longer trust salespeople. Depending on which research you read, I think Gartner talked about 72% of buyers wanting a rep-free sales experience because they no longer trust vendors or salespeople. So what can we do? What should organizations be thinking about in order to adapt their approach so that they can be trusted again by buyers and enable salespeople to have rapport building conversations that are meaningful as opposed to this constant barrage of insight-led noise that buyers no longer listen to?
I mean, just jumping in there before Ram answered, but I think Tim looked at that with Eric Stein last week, and Eric Stein nailed something in one comment, which is there's a low barrier to entry for salespeople.
Yeah.
There's no qualification for it. There's not necessarily, in America there's a lot more, but there's no actual university pathway for learning. Anybody can effectively pick up a bag, pick up a set of car keys, pick up a map, territory, and off they go. And that's a big problem because there's no such low barriers of entry for virtually anything else. I mean, you don't let somebody come in and rewire your house unless you're pretty competent that they are a competent comfortable that they're a competent electrician.
Yeah,
Otherwise, they'll burn your house down. Yeah, but actually, that competent electrician can go out and sell something tomorrow because there's no barrier. And I think that's this thing, isn't it? Where how do we change that barrier to entry positively to say, you know what, I am professional and I am capable of doing these things. Yeah. And then actually, I think to Ram's point, then you start to tackle things like imposter syndrome, where a lot of people who are very senior in another field have to go out and sell, and they feel really uneasy about doing it. So I think, you know, Tim, and it would be lovely to get his thoughts at the end. Tim and Eric nailed it last week, which is it's that barrier to entry which is so low that causes a distrust. Yeah. And if we can change that, it also, and I'm interested around, changes the perception of pride in people.
Yeah.
I feel proud.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, Alex, the problem is customers have stopped trusting you, because if you are stressed and you are trying to deliver something or achieve your numbers or hit your targets or make your commission, depending on whatever you are doing, you are focused only on that. So I read somewhere yesterday, customers smell that desperation a mile ahead. So they know that you're not putting their interests in front of you, and you're trying to sell them, you know, because I've got a nail, every solution, or if I've got a hammer, every solution is a nail. It's not what you need to be doing. So what happens when you are actually in a high stress situation like that is what we call as cortical inhibition, which is basically you are trying to do things. You're in the survival mode. So you actually go on doing what you think you've been doing always, and you think that's obviously got to get you results. Unfortunately, you have to have a moment. That's not going to work. You need to actually build that empathy and trust, which takes a long time, because once you lose that trust, it is very difficult to regain it. I mean, studies have shown that you need to have around 7 to 8 interactions, positive interactions, without you expecting something and doing something for the customer to build that trust and also demonstrate empathy. Only when you do that, they will actually let go of that fear, which basically drives them to not trust you, because they're thinking, why is he or she talking to me like this? What do they want at the end of this? And that fear prevents them from opening up. And that's where I would start the journey. So companies have to take the measurement from the customer side also, because I'm sure they're using NPS and so many other metrics. How are they actually using it to connect it with the performance of the salesperson and connecting it back to the well-being of the salesperson? And then go back and reflect, what can they do differently to give this person some safe space to learn, to make some mistakes, knowledge sharing. How much of that is happening? That's another challenge, because that's where we are all driven and we want to be the number one and make the most of whatever we have. So you are competing against each other rather than working together as a team. And that basically is probably one of the fundamental things that needs to be addressed. And of course, lack of, people's perception of you don't have to be a professional to get into sales. That's something which it needs to be tackled. Yeah. I mean, getting into sales is easy, but performing and existing and surviving and excelling is the difficult part. Yeah. It's like anyone can get onto a roller coaster, but how many of them will enjoy it? How many of them will actually go again and again? That's the challenge. And salespeople do that continuously because they love that.
What about
the role of the
interest? No, you mentioned something about team, and I know we've got another guest. So I'd love you to bring on your guest, because that issue about team, sales leaders can't do this on their own. So what supporting cast, what help do they need from the rest of the business? Yeah. Let's go explore that.
Yeah. Why not? So our next guest, if we can bring Tias Hazebroek on. Tias, hello. Do you want to introduce yourself? I see you're in the car there, or your private office.
If I knew I had another 20 minutes, I would have made it to the office, I suppose. But I stopped the car just to. It's getting a bit hot, so but that's okay.
Okay.
So my name is Tias Hazebroek. I started my own company roughly 3 years ago. And right now I'm working with a great company, which is called Actito, as head of sales for the emerging markets.
Cool. Welcome.
Thank you, Alex.
Great to have you on the show today. And obviously you and I have worked together in the past. So transitioning on this topic of mental health in the sales force, and thinking about how if you look at the World Health Organization, they're talking about the fact that within the next 2 years, 27% of the workforce will be Gen Z. And I'm thinking about sales and mental health in sales, and the fact that we can see with Gen Z that they're more receptive. They seem to be struggling, certainly in a sales role, with regards to high levels of stress and mental health in sales. Tias, do you have a view on the age of the sales force in the coming years, and the effects that mental health might be having on them versus perhaps more senior, seasoned salespeople that have had an opportunity to build up that resilience in their belief system?
Well, that's an interesting walk you're taking there, because on one hand you would say seasoned salespeople would have their own network, accessibility, etc., etc. So a form of resilience, perhaps. However, what we see in the market right now is that buying behavior of companies, of individuals, consumers is changing. And I wonder whether seasoned sales will still be as effective over time versus the young, the young generation. And in regards to pressure, mental health, so to speak, and the effects of I would say company pressure that you put on results. I
Yeah.
see that the younger generations are acting slightly different with that pressure. And I think that also has to do with the fact that we are moving, and we have been moving, especially in the turf that we've been active, Alex, in diversifying the sales process versus the old way. So you have a specialty, a singular point of entry, a specific task. Even though that it becomes more and more complex, pipe, as you know, is more difficult to get than ever before. But I do feel that the younger generation, and I'm reading Generation Z and beyond, I would say, is far more, I would almost call it, relaxed about it. That's what I see. And then you have the middle layer, huh? So that's us, a little bit younger than us, perhaps, and that's where I see difficulties arise, and that has to do with performance on one hand, difficulty building pipe, pressure on the sales. What do you do? And we have the tendency as management to start micromanaging as soon as the pipe dries up. Huh? And so actually we're doing the wrong type of things. Whereas you're starting to ask of the sales to do other things than what would potentially generate business. So it's an interesting walk you're taking there, because coming back to the initial question, I would say that the younger generation is more, or potentially more, resilient because they have a different opinion and approach in regards to life and work balance. And the middle age, especially, having kids, marriage, all the stuff that comes with it. I see that they have more difficulties in adapting to what I would say a new way of doing sales.
Yeah, because what they did before. So you're talking about the middle generation, what they did before that
Yeah.
once worked that no longer works today, and having to
Well,
adapt. Yeah,
that's what we see today, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's exactly what we see today.
Yeah. Let's bring Ram back on, because I'd love to get Ram's take on that point, Ram, in terms of in terms of the workforce, the sales force getting younger, and what organizations should be thinking about in relation to that, and those individuals having very different kind of mental strength or resilience, let's say, compared to their more experienced counterparts.
Sure, Alex. I mean, as Tias mentioned, this generation grew up with internet, with smartphones, and they can get a lot of things done effectively than what we middle-aged people can think of even doing or achieving. And their approach to life and work is totally different. It is, we see, at least our generation is seeing, work and life as inseparable, and we have to work, and life is happens. We talk about retirement and other things and what we will do or we can do after we retire. But this current generation is not like that. They want, work as a means to support their life. So their approach to challenges, their approach to what they want out of work is also changing. And companies have to become cognizant of that. And if you look at recruitment strategies that companies are employing, they are now being more mindful of what these people want and trying to build that. So one of the things I read somewhere recently is where they talked about the youngsters, the millennials or the Gen Zs. They are looking for companies that care about their employees. So do they actually have a well-being culture in place? Do they actually care about them? How evidence it? Show me it's like show me the money, Jerry Maguire. Show me the proof is what these people are asking, and that's not actually. And as Tia said, the senior leadership and the middle managers or middle-aged people have not woken up to it fully. And given that we have got probably less than a decade before, these guys come into workforce full steam ahead, we'll have to make those changes now.
Yeah,
And that's the big challenge.
I'd love to get your view on this, Andy. I read, and I've seen the presentation from a guy called Dr. Julian Birkinshaw, and he did a load of work back in, I think, 2014, where he looked at, what is the competitive advantage for businesses today or back then. And he was saying that we've come out of this knowledge, this knowledge era, or we're coming out of this knowledge era. No longer are we in this era or this place where insight and how great your insight is, is no longer gives you the competitive advantage, and it's more an democracy and your shared values and beliefs that really count and provide or will provide organizations the competitive advantage in the future. And when I think of that, I think about people and the individuals providing that competitive advantage, not necessarily the organization. You familiar with his work, by the way?
I'm not overly familiar with his work. I've kind of seen those kind of studies come out. But when you then make that connection to people, that's it. I mean, the very, very basics, most organizations can replicate their competitors' products. Yeah. Most organizations can replicate the platforms that they use, the pricing strategies and the processes. The bit that they can't replicate is the person. Because the person that works for you can't obviously by logic work for anybody else. So to what Tias has said and what Ram has said is, fundamentally it's how you help these people turn up to be the absolute best version of themselves that they can be. And we don't tend to do that. And I think Tias mentioned that, and I'd love to get him back on, which is, we tend to get stressed as managers. And then Tias, you were saying, we then start to micromanage, and then that you start to get into a spiral. So tell us a bit more about what you see there.
You're absolutely right, by the way. So well put. What I see in day-to-day basis is that we have the tendency to, which is logical, right? So when business is dropping, when everybody's under pressure, operations is screaming, saying, "Hey guys, where's the business?" People are getting fired because there's insufficient profitability. That's when shit hits the fan, right? So the CEO wants to know exactly what's happening. The CFO wants to know exactly what's happening. So we have, and they drop that basically in the middle management, if there is a middle management. And by the way, guys, I'm Dutch, so I'm not a native speaker, so I do apologize.
I hope we can
And
bleep it
correct me,
out.
correct. But inevitably, it's exactly what you're saying. So at the cross point of trying to understand the business, we're lacking, and I heard Ram saying that as well. We're losing the trust in our people because we're starting to get to the bottom of everything they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and basically we're making reporters out of them.
Yeah,
And it
you
takes
talked about this.
such a
Yep.
load out of their day, whereas they could have been spending their time, obviously, with customers. And that, I think, it has everything to do with the middle management not
Yep.
pushing back. Because, in all fairness, I used to be a middle manager in the big red, and I've heard that, and I know a couple of you have operated in that same space.
Yep.
And I made the same mistakes there.
Yeah.
When
But when,
when
but
yeah,
how,
go ahead.
how confident do you feel about pushing back, especially when you talk about the risk of being fired, as you say?
That's true. Well, then luckily there's more jobs than, and especially in these times. No, but seriously, they you have to think of this. So you've made your miles, you've got the experience under your belt. Rely on that, trust that, and the guys that hired you have hired you for a specific job, and that is to manage these people to exactly what was said earlier, to make them achieve or become the best version of themselves. So whenever there's from the top line, from the top down, there is the pressure of starting to report on things that really don't matter, and will not help the business. Then I think by all means, if you lack the experience, like I used to have in the big red, then you have the tendency to, move that pressure down the line and further on the people. Whereas today, I would say, look, guys, this is seriously not going to help. And if they would fire me, then I think, that's not the company I want to work for.
Yeah. So look, I know, Tias, you're not a mental health expert. You're a very experienced sales leader. So I very much appreciate you getting involved in this important conversation. But I can't help but think, as sales leaders, we have a responsibility, a duty of care to our people, our teams, and their mental health, their well-being. And so, when does that start? Do we consider people's mental health, salespeople's mental health in the hiring process, for example? And do you, as a sales leader, feel confident that you're hiring, mentally resilient people? You're willing to adapt and provide well-being support to the people that you're hiring. And where do you bring HR into this? Do you see HR playing a role?
That's quite some questions. Um, so let's start at the start. So when you're starting to recruit someone, and let me be quite frank, I don't believe you are ever able to hire someone who's mental health resilient, I think you said,
Hmm.
because inevitably you can't predict the future. So everything could happen, from a private thing, a marriage going bad, kids, urgently ill, all sorts of stuff that have an effect and that's not even work related. And then there's work, and there's a combination, right? So you're trying to shape a team, and we touched on this earlier, I think, on inclusion, right? Everybody, trying to shape a team which is complementary to one another. And I think it's really hard to be completely safe when you select someone. You can do everything you want to do out of the book, so you can do tests, you can do whatever. You can get the references. You have 6, 7 conversations with multiple people. You do everything from the book or out of the book. But still, there's
Yeah.
always a risk. So
Yeah.
so that said, you can do as much as you can. And I think where does it start was one of your questions. It starts at the very beginning.
Yeah.
It starts the first day. It starts at the first touch. It starts with building that trust primarily. So that's key. If you do not build trust right from the start and give trust right from the start, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're potentially facing exactly what we've talked about earlier, that
But I
people
think,
become detached. And that's oh, I have a problem with my battery, guys, by the way.
don't worry, it shows we're live, which is great. I think the thing that Tias has blown the doors off, to quote Michael Caine, is this lack of trust of salespeople by their own companies.
Yeah.
So the company doesn't trust the managers basically therefore get put under pressure to, inspect and micromanage the salespeople. And we talked about this with Adam a couple of episodes ago, which is, if you're a procurement person in that company that Tias has just talked about, you don't trust your own salespeople, so why would you trust the salespeople from your suppliers that walk in?
Yeah.
And it continues to kind of bring this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of no trust anywhere of salespeople, either the ones that work for you or the ones that walk through the door to actually sell you something as an organisation.
Yeah. And salespeople just end up going through the motions because it's an easy life for them with their manager, and it's not necessarily getting the results that the business needs.
No, absolutely. But Tias, he's dropped off, so he's either his car's been towed away or his battery's well and truly gone.
Yeah.
So Ram, coming back to you, just give us a little bit more information about what you've designed with Dr. Childs. I know you're supporting Jeff, so the ISP is working really hard to support that survey and help gather even more data around
Jeff
that.
Risley?
Yep.
Oh, brilliant.
So that's happening. But also, Ram, today you're launching the wellbeing standard for salespeople. So what is that, and why should we care?
See, what we have come up with is basically to connect all the best practices that companies have from a health and well-being statements that they already have. What we're then trying to look at is there are 3 components to it. One is basically what can the leaders do to ensure that there is a proper well-being plan that is implemented. Then what is the role of the culture, the supporting act, which is the HR, and the role of well-being champion. So we are looking at that. And the third element is actually concerning the sales person. So how can they ensure that their well-being is actually met and they actually don't have any issues when it comes to tackling their own personal demons outside work and perform effectively. So what we have done is we have uh, brought in all the best practices that we've seen from others and created some sort of a guiding document. But what we want to do before we haven't launched it officially, Andy, what we are doing now is basically we are reaching out to companies who are members of ISP to actually walk them through this, get their views. Because one of the things that I said earlier is no one is involved. A standard is just thrust upon people. So we don't want to do the same thing. So we want to actually get the companies involved to look at the various aspects that we are talking about and what is it that is good in their organizations, and then build it as part of the charter. Well, like to make it simple, like I'll probably use the analogy of a law. If we all know that there are the purpose of going back to what Simon Sinek says, why, how, and what. Why do we have traffic laws? Because to ensure we want to ensure everyone is safe on the road. And how do we do that? By having certain rules and regulations, which is don't jump the traffic light, don't drive beyond 30 or 20 or whatever. And what happens if you do that? You get penalized 3 points on the license or a driving course or whatever. So we are trying to adopt a similar approach to creating the well-being standard. We're trying to get to people to understand the why, and the how and the what will be designed with the help of the participant companies. And then what we also want to do is you can't manage anything if you can't measure it. So we're going to be actually measuring the well-being in depth any company that signs up to the charter will be asked to complete a simple 5-minute survey, which will give us the insights. And then we will provide them with some direction as to what they are doing to what people are saying, because we are trying to bring multiple perspectives. We talked about work, we talked about life. We are trying to bring all those and then give some feedback to companies so that they can act on it. So that's what we're trying to do. Because it's rather than just publish it as a standard or a pledge, we want to bring it to life by doing something with it. So that's what our plans are, Andy.
That's brilliant to hear, and I know we've got Tias back, so it'd be nice with just like 4.5 minutes to go to cut back to Tias and ask him about his role or his view of what's the role of senior leadership in making this work, and how did you as a senior leader work with HR to bring it all to life, Tias?
There's a couple of things I think over time that I learned that I could share with you guys, and you may obviously add to that. So I think one of the first things is you should definitely align what you're trying to achieve with HR at the very beginning, and that's about budgets, it's about the criteria, the level of seniority, the experience, all of the, I would say, hard skills, and if possible, some of the soft skills as well. And I think there's companies that do that really well. In particular, I would say the SaaS companies, the startups, the incredible what they achieve sometimes in the hiring process. In a week, a candidate has spoken with C-level all down to operation and the team he's going to work with. And then finishing up with HR, and everything is ready. Everything is done. There's the bandwidth in regards to negotiations on salary, the package, the whole thing. And then of course there's this interesting gap or thing you've just mentioned, which is that mental health, and apart from that inclusion. Whereas in the hiring process, so at the very beginning, I think these things are, in my general opinion, underlighted. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. That'll do.
But
Yeah.
we could learn a lot there. We could do really something more, especially when you're talking about inclusion. It's an element that I think is most of the time missing in the hiring process. Mental health state. How does he or she operate in the team? Am I creating mini-me's, which is, the biggest mistake you make at the very beginning, to how do I make this team work and be complementary to one another? Now, I have a question on that matter, if I may.
Absolutely.
Go
So,
for it.
inclusion, right? Inclusion, mental health, and I think organizations that do that, or try to achieve that, I think is a really good beginning. But what I see, and I wonder what your opinion is there, is that most of the organizations are unable to facilitate and capitalize on an all-inclusion hiring process, because the processes, the structure, especially in sales, they're rigid, right? So you have one person having what do you call it? A vertical media, or publishing media, someone else's finance, quite isolated. And then there's this remuneration, bonus plans, and stuff like that. How do you make that work? Because
It's a really good question.
You got about 20 seconds to answer it.
I think you've got to be authentic in it, ultimately, and you've got to break the mold to answer that. And what I'd like to do, TS, is take this and do a little video to kind of actually answer that for you, because we are literally at 39 seconds left. So, but I think actually you've got to break the mold, because people actually looking at hiring in their own image. You just said mini-me's. Actually, no, cast the net wide, take a chance, and actually next week we're going to be having Dr. Rebecca on to talk about actually neurodiversity and some really good examples where actually companies have said we're going to be biased in the opposite direction and look at what that talent has brought us. So I want to say thank you, Tias, to
Yeah.
you. It's been brilliant, and I can't wait to actually unpack that a little bit more before our next episode. And Ram, brilliant work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Thanks to the studio team here. Really good set of conversations today, and I look forward to expanding on those for World Health Day as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you for celebrating that with us today. Go grab a cup of tea and have a chat with a friend or colleague. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
We will. Thank you.
Bye-bye.